This is Justice, History, and the Law. Lectures, discussions, and interviews from the Robert H. Jackson Center in Jamestown, New York.
On today's show, Miss Siri Frigaard discusses her experience in international law and how being a woman affects that experience. Greg Peterson of the Robert H. Jackson Center introduces the first speaker.
In a few seconds, I will call up Christine Chung, who will introduce our speaker. Christine has spent several years in The Hague working as the senior trial attorney at the International Criminal Court. She investigated and prosecuted perpetrators of war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Darfur region of the Sudan, in Uganda, and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Prior to her ICC appointment, Christine served as a federal prosecutor at the United States Attorney's Office in Manhattan, where she prosecuted gangs, organized crime, white-collar fraud, and terrorism cases. She is a visiting lecturer and senior fellow at the Shell Center for International Human Rights at Yale Law School and is a graduate of Yale College and Harvard Law School and is currently a partner at Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. Also, she was one of the movie stars of the movie The Reckoning. For those who had a chance to see it, and those who did not have a chance to see it, one should see that, and that was produced by Paco de Onis and Pam Yates, who they may have left by now. But without any further ado, Christine Chung.
Thank you for that nice introduction. It sometimes happens at conferences like these that you are asked to introduce someone that you know not so well but admire greatly. And I admire Siri Frigaard very much. And so it's a great honor to be in front of you and introduce you to her. In this community, for those of you Chautauqua residents, the prosecutors and practitioners amongst us, these are the occasions when we get to see each other and say hi again and get up to date with what we've been doing, what's been going on in our world. And I've met Siri sort of coming and going, but never for any length of time. I'm going to tell you the vitals about her, and then I'm going to focus on a couple of things. She is currently the Chief Prosecutor of the National Norwegian Authority for the Prosecution of Organized and Serious Crimes. And she's been in that position since 2005 when the office was created by the Norwegian government. Among her responsibilities is the prosecution of the big three: genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Norway has a version of universal jurisdiction, so it falls within her office's mandate to pursue the prosecution of these crimes within Norway and of people who are of other than Norwegian nationality. Before that, she was the Deputy Director of the National Criminal Investigation Service from 2003 to 2005. And before that were her international stints. From 2002 to 2003, Siri was the Deputy Prosecutor General of the Serious Crimes Unit in East Timor. This was an office created within the East Timorese justice system that was charged with prosecuting serious crimes that occurred during the unrest in East Timor at a time when there was a national referendum on independence, and the population voted overwhelmingly in favor of independence. And the Indonesian government, which had essentially annexed East Timor 20 years before, was not very happy with that. And the Indonesian government orchestrated through East Timorese militias to basically scorch the earth on their way out of East Timor. And so as a result, thousands of people died and most of the population was displaced, and it was in Siri's mandate and jurisdiction to prosecute the crimes that resulted from that unrest. Before that, she was in Albania. She was a prosecutor and senior legal advisor to the Chief Prosecutor in Albania. And before that, Siri had this double that we prosecutors always admire, which is that she was a very high officer in the police force based in Oslo. So she has had a long career in public service, both domestic and international. In thinking about what to say about Siri and how to introduce you to her, especially those of you who don't know her background so well, our friends and attendees, I think I would say about her that she has had one of the tours of duty that I think the rest of us prosecutors and judges would have to concede has been one of the toughest. She was in a system in East Timor that was being built from the ground up. When the UN transitional team helped to set up the Timorese justice system, there was really nothing there. I've seen figures that say there were 1 to 6 practicing attorneys there at the time. The judicial system was being set up and recreated. And Siri came in the middle of this process at a time when the Serious Crimes Unit was really being very seriously criticized for not doing its job properly, not executing its mandate correctly. And she is credited with having brought order to that, having made some decisions about prosecuting the most senior leaders. She led the office at a time when the most important indictments were returned, including one of an Indonesian general who ultimately could not be arrested, but she brought the productivity of the office and the integrity of the office and the prosecutions that the office brought to sort of a new level. And the difficulty, and this is something that we haven't discussed yet in this group, and I was interested about the little parts of Telford Taylor's books that has come up in the seminar so far, in the conference so far. Another thing that Telford Taylor talks about that we haven't really talked about, and I think that also relates to Siri, is the hardship and the stress. And somebody used the word stress this morning. It might have been Judge Kamen. When prosecutors leave their home systems and they go to work in this strange international justice system, I think we all have moments of sort of disorientation and disbelief that something that we had built up to be an ideal is, in its actual workings, incredibly difficult to carry out. And also working in this environment that is so political, for many of us for the first time, being forced to confront that prosecuting is not just something that you do as an end because everybody accepts that it needs to be done. You do it with this outer layer of politics that is always infringing and taking authority away from you. At Nuremberg, Taylor talks about how, I think as a result of these things, maybe he didn't put it this way, but Nuremberg was an unhappy place, not just because it was Nuremberg and it was bombed, but nobody got along. It's an incredibly stressful environment, these international tribunals, and actually one of the things that you learn to deal with is fighting with your friends all the time. You have incredibly committed people, but you're just in this situation where there's so much responsibility on you and so much difficulty and so many challenges that it can be very hard to find a way forward, even when you are working with people who are equally devoted to the cause as you are, maybe especially because you're working with people who are equally devoted to the cause. Siri's tenure at the East Timorese in the East Timorese system, what ultimately happened is that she shaped up the system in a way that it hadn't really been shaped up before. And at the moment when she was achieving these indictments against leaders who were mainly in Indonesia, what happened is that the UN more or less, I don't know, she would put it a different way probably, but they kind of took a hands-off approach and started disclaiming that they had involvement in the system, even though they were supporting the Serious Crimes Unit, were funding it, were very much a reason that the Serious Crimes Unit existed, made public statements sort of disavowing their involvement in the process, stepped back from it, and at the same time, the Timorese government, which at the time was more interested in reconciliation with the Indonesian government and making nice, also began withdrawing support from the Justice Initiative. And so the Serious Crimes Unit in many ways was left sort of standing alone to do the things that it was supposed to do, the things that it was mandated to do, the right thing to do, but without a lot of external support. And she also had incredible internal difficulties, including lack of translators, trials that were carried on, ultimately not as many as should have been, but that were criticized for not being fair enough, not being sort of robust enough. And so I think for those of us who are in the community, the reminder is, our image of Siri, for those of you who are outside the community, is that she really held her head high and accomplished what could be accomplished in extremely difficult circumstances. And in the 15 months that she was there, I think that those of us who are also practitioners would concede that she faced every form of challenge that the rest of us have faced in a more limited geographic scenario, in a more limited time scenario, but every hardball was really thrown at her. And she achieved. And now the at least part of the truth is there. The people who are under indictment are under indictment, even if they're still running for political office. And it's a great reminder and story about how this venture is always one of fits and starts. And there are these people who are involved in the venture who rise above it. And the last thought I would leave you with about Siri, and I don't have to know her well to say this because I know she's going to demonstrate it when she stands here. Given that this is a conference about women, I think one characteristic that women prosecutors can have that the men really can't have is grace. There's a way that women can do this job that is just demonstrating integrity and calmness and compassion, and you associate that with the word grace in a way that you really can't associate that word with men. Men can be stalwart or strong but certainly as someone who is, and I introduced Siri as practitioner to practitioner and less experienced practitioner to more experienced practitioner, certainly one of the things that I really admire about her is I see this in her. And you need only have a conversation with her to understand that wherever she is, whether she's in Norway or in Timor or in Albania or wherever she'll go next, she is representing victims with compassion, she's bringing integrity to her job, and she's thinking about the future of this crazy venture in which she's already had many dust-ups, but she is working in every way that she can to move the venture forward. And I think what she's going to talk to you about today is some of the future of international criminal law, which, perversely enough, is domestic. So I'm really pleased to introduce Siri Frigaard.
Thank you so much, Christine, for that introduction. Let me start by saying that I'm really honored to be invited to this conference. And for me, it has been a great, great pleasure to be here, and also it has been enormously interesting. Because in a way, I feel that it has given me some more, it's okay? It has given me a little bit more energy to go back to do what I'm doing at the time being. Because I would like to say, also because of what Christine said, that sometimes being a prosecutor is lonely, it's hard, you have to take decisions that you know that will be criticized whatever you do, and you have to stand up for them. I will also say that being a female prosecutor, I don't consider that as a disadvantage. I consider it as an advantage. And like Leslie said earlier today, that when she got the question in the panel that she didn't think about it because she did her job, I would say the same thing. I do my job the best I can. like everybody else. And if I'm a female or male, it doesn't matter, because the matter is what you do and how you do it. I must admit that I'm from a time where I have always been in audience where I've been looking for to see if there are more females. And very often there are not. And I must admit that I'll try to... Is that better? Yeah, good. And I must admit that being the only female sometimes makes something with me, because I'm asking myself why. And I feel that it's nice to have somebody to look at to see the same sex. But as I said, I started up in a time where there were not so many female lawyers. Also, when I took my education in the law study, in Norway there was nothing called international criminal law. It didn't exist at university. When I left university, I had no idea about what is international criminal law. That came later on. But to get to pass the exam in Norway, you have to be specialized in something. So instead, I did choose women's right. I was at that time a mother with 2 kids, trying to go to lecture within daycare and whatever it was, and always walking with a book in my hand trying to read. So I decided I want to do the women's law. And the women's law in Norway, that was what we did in that small unit of female who took this subject, was that we were looking at all the Norwegian regulations from the female perspective. And that was quite shocking, because we discovered that the regulation we had was made by man for man, and the female didn't fit properly in it. We had a very strong female professor at that time at the university, and she managed to change quite a bit of this, and today we have a much better system. Also, I would like to say something about being a female also abroad. As I said, I'm who I am. But I've had some experience with being a female that is quite funny or interesting or frustrating, you name it. I went to Albania to be in charge of an investigation. It was a politician, second in charge in the Democratic Party, who was killed. Barisha, who was the leader of the Democratic Party, he's prime minister today, he went out on television 1 hour after this guy was killed, saying that the people behind this murder, this political murder, is the government and the General Prosecutor of Albania. That's why I came in, because the General Prosecutor, he wanted somebody else to take care of that investigation, not to be accused of not doing it properly. In that capacity, I had to have a meeting with Mr. Barisha, who went on television and said this. He was willing to give a statement to the American ambassador, which unfortunately the American ambassador did, which he shouldn't have done because he was not a prosecution. But he did it. So I tried after that to have meetings with Barisha to persuade him to give a statement to us. There was a Swedish judge working with me in that office, but his task was to help the General Prosecutor in improving the system. So he came with me to the meetings because he wanted to. He was not supposed to be there, but he wanted to. Then we came to the meeting with Mr. Barisha, who is a very special man, I must say. And I asked the questions, and Mr. Barisha answered, looking at the Swedish judge. I asked the question, he was answering to the Swedish judge. He didn't look at me at all. And I got more and more furious. But in the 3rd meeting, finally, he accepted that he was going to look at me. And that was because I went alone. So this, yeah. The other experience, I would like to say something about this from East Timor. When I came there, we had to have a meeting with the Attorney General of Indonesia because we were trying to persuade them to cooperate with us when it comes to witnesses and evidence and so on. There was an MOU signed by you and the Attorney General, but he didn't want to accept it. So in a way, the way the cooperation was working was that we were helping them and they were not helping us. So we went to a meeting, we went to several meetings, but the first meeting we came to was in Bali. And we had discussions and we came nowhere. It was really frustrating, but he was very polite, very nice, but we came really nowhere. Then he invited us for a dinner in the evening. And when we came to this dinner, we were hoping, and we had discussed before we went up to this dinner, that we were trying to go to discuss with him during the dinner. What happened? I was placed by the table where all the wives were sitting. And of course, I don't care about that in a way, but I was there to work. And then I discovered that all the men had disappeared into a room. And there I was sitting, discussing other things. And that frustration was quite strongly, because you were really excluded. And then, if you look at my name, my first name is written S-I-R-I. Take away the last I, and you get Sir. Very often, I am addressed in emails, letters, as Mr. Sometimes I send a message back and say, please, Mrs. But very often, I'm just writing, and I use my name and nothing more. It goes on, and then I'm coming to meetings, and then I'm being introduced, and then everything is confusion. Because who am I? Where's Sir Frigaard? And the way I see it is because very often they are giving out presents, and then they're coming to me saying, well, this is the tie. So I also get a tie. Or you see somebody rushing around to find something else. But that is, in a way, an advantage. Because, in a way, I am suddenly one step ahead of them, because they are confused, I am not. So being a female in this position is very, very good. And also I think it's more difficult for male to be angry with me. So in a way, there are sides that are quite good. Well, when I was asked to talk about my work, David mentioned East Timor. And the problem, as David knows, that when I start talking about East Timor, I can talk for hours. Because still I'm upset with not things that happened in East Timor, but what didn't happen. But for me, in a way, East Timor is the past. Because it has closed down. It was the smallest, the cheapest, and the first one to close down. And we had not finished our work. We were about to do a good job, but we did not get the possibility to really do a proper job. The future, in my opinion, is Norway. And when I'm saying Norway, I'm not talking about Norway as Norway. I'm talking about Norway as the national authorities. Because what is happening? The tribunals are closing down. ICC is not able to take all the cases that will come up. Therefore, you have to start thinking about what to do with the national jurisdiction. And when I say national jurisdiction, I'm not meaning only the country where the offense happened. I'm talking about third countries. And let me remind you about the film we saw last night, The Wanted. The problem is, like it was in France, you have people coming to your country, hiding, some of them with false names, some of them openly. They are accused of war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, whatever. And if you don't have operationals or have units or systems in those countries to deal with these cases, we are losing the fight against impunity. And we will not hold these people accountable. So therefore, I want to focus, with the short time I have, a little bit more about Norway and what's happening in Norway. But I would say two things about East Timor before I go over there. When I arrived in East Timor in January 2002, it was a shock. I have to admit it. It was a shock to arrive there. And for the first 3 months, every night I was saying to myself, why did you go? You were at home and had a very nice position. Why did you go into this mess? Because I was shocked. There was no resources. There was no... there was no... You couldn't see that the people even were working in the same direction. Everybody was... Have you seen the picture of a proper leader? That's a person in the middle, and then you have the people following. Another type of a leader is the person who stands in the middle and everybody goes out. And that was a feeling I had when I came there. I had the feeling that everybody was working for themselves because there was no strategy or what to do. I'm not blaming anybody for this, because there has been a vacancy in the position that I took over for a long time. And also because there has been some problems within the unit. So in a way, there's nobody's fault, but that was how it was. Of course, the resources, few investigators, few translators, even we didn't have cars to send the people out in the district to take statements. So in a way, it was quite a difficult job to change it, but we did. And that is not thanks to me. That is thanks to all the people working in the unit. Because everybody wanted to do a proper job. And I think that is something that is characterizing for prosecutors and investigators. We really want to do a proper job, but we need a possibility to do it. What I did when I came there was that I started to fight the UN to get resources. And in that position, it's quite good to be a prosecutor with a permanent position at home. Because every time they said no to me, I'm very stubborn. So when they said no, I said, okay, then I leave tomorrow. And they didn't want me to leave because my predecessor had left. And he made quite a fuss about that. So in a way, I wasn't in that position, in a good position, because I could threaten with it. And I knew I had a position, so I was not dependent on the UN. Finally, we started to get resources. And finally, we also was allowed to make a plan for which positions we needed to do a proper job. Investigators, forensic people, supporting staff, you name them. The units were divided into teams. We had teams for each district or region. But then we decided that I wanted to go follow what was marked in Security Resolution 1272 in 1999, where they were saying to keep accountable those most responsible for the serious crimes. Because in East Timor, the problem was that people were coming back from West Timor. They came to the border, the police arrested them and handed them over to the serious crimes. So in a way, all the people they were investigated was the small fish, and that was because you couldn't return them to their villages because they would be killed. So in a way, this was a sort of a problem. Then we established a national team which only task was to investigate those behind these crimes, the most responsible. And they got all the resources they needed. They were prioritized. It came as a shock after 2 months, or a little bit uncertain, but about 2 months after I gave personal list to the UN for the position I needed, and some of them had been advertised already, and we had been interviewing people. Then the UN told me, you have to start downsizing. Why? I never got an answer. But what I think happened was that the UN New York told the mission that the mission was going to fade out and they had to start downsizing. And in a way, the UN, or the persons in charge of the UN, or the mission in East Timor, they didn't understand that investigation is something different from administration, for instance. So in a way, we had to downsize in the same pace as the other units. So we were never really given the possibility to do a good job. When I'm saying this, it's because I will say something about the gender team. We had a gender team of 3 skilled female investigators. To be able to investigate, I had to borrow police officer for the police commissioner. But I had 1 UN investigator and 2 police investigators. They were all used to investigate rapes. They went around in the district, in the whole country, and did this investigation. And what they discovered was that the females in the villages that had been raped, they had a really strong desire to have somebody to talk to get attention, somebody whose shoulder they could cry on. I don't think all of them were so occupied by prosecution, but they needed somebody that listened to them. And these 3 investigators were very clever in doing that. But that also gave us a setback, because when you're coming into a village where you have many, many widows, some of them are raped, others are not. And the ones that are not raped see that suddenly some of them get attention. They also wanted attention. So there, suddenly you got false accusations of rapes. So we had to be very careful. My regret is that we were never able to investigate enough to put into the big indictment that was indicting 8 persons, including General Viranto, for rape as crimes against humanity. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. What I'm saying is that we did not have enough resources and time to be able to link the rapes to those accused persons in that indictment. I regret it, and I have been working with rapes in Norway for quite a long time, and wanted to do a good job on this field. But the point is, as a prosecutor with the responsibility, you sometimes have to take decisions that are not the decision that you really want to take. Because for us, we were being downsized. We were being accused of doing nothing. For me, it was very important to come out with this indictment, placing the guilt on the Indonesian High Command, military and police. That was the important thing. So we decided that, okay, to be sure for the rape, we had to do much more investigation, but we did not have the time to do it and the possibility, because we were being downsized, and most of the people who were doing this investigation was leaving East Timor. So that is what I regret, but that's life. Sometimes you have to make those decisions. And then I wanted to mention something about political will. In the reckoning, Ocampo was talking also about that. It did not come as a shock, but still we were quite surprised when we finally presented the indictment that indicted General Viranto who was a former Minister of Defense. He was the top head of the military. And also, 3 years ago, I think it was, or something like that, he was a presidential candidate in Indonesia. When we presented this indictment, we did it like the way that I went to court, presented the indictment one day. We told the court to keep it very, very secure. And then I took a copy and went to the UN. The SRSG's office gave them one copy. I went to the president of the country. I went to the Minister of Justice. I went to the Prime Minister. I went to the Minister of Justice and Foreign Affairs, yes. All got a copy, and all of them were told that tomorrow this will go public. And in a way, everybody smiled and thanked, and yes, and there was no reaction except by the UN. And that surprised me. The next day, in a way, it exploded. And I can understand the East Timorese government. They were totally against it in the press. And the reason they gave was that this is something that UN started, and UN has to finish it. This is something UN did, it's a UN indictment. We were all UN people. But of course, what UN said was that this is under the authority of the East Timorese General Prosecutor. It has nothing to do with us. It's not a UN indictment. Formally, this is correct. But I had the power to sign the indictment and did sign the indictments. The General Prosecutors, he was always giving a draft, and I told him that comment on it if you want to. He never did. He always said that you know what you're doing, I trust you, you do it. So in a way I understand the East Timorese that they were saying that we can't handle it because they are too small, too inexperienced, and too much pressed into all the Indonesia. You know, they are the neighbor of Indonesia, and they are dependent on the good relationship. So in a way that didn't surprise me. But it did surprise me that officially UN did not support it at all. Because they could say formally it's under the authority of the General Prosecutor, but they could at least say, we support what you have been doing, we support the indictment. They did not. So in a way, we discovered that there was no political will whatsoever to support the indictment we came out with. And there has been none afterwards either. The only one that has been supporting us officially are the NGOs. And also I think the NGOs made a change in the UN because UN realized that they had to see something more favorable. But the point is that nothing is happening with these indictments because there is no political pressure on Indonesia. And this is unlike all the other tribunals because you have the political pressure to help you to get the people to court. So when Kofi Annan said that we have to give a signal to those, I can't recall exact what he said, and my glasses is down there, so I can't even read it. But he said that we have to give a signal to future perpetrators that we do not tolerate that those crimes stand without being prosecuted and punished. So this is my interesting experience and challenge for East Timor. If I can take 5 minutes, I know I've been talking as usual too much about East Timor, but if I could say just a few words about what we do in Norway, because as you might know, in Europe now they are trying to establish units that are dealing with these crimes and only these crimes. You got it in Denmark. We got it in 2005. They have got it now in Sweden. You have it in the Netherlands. You have it in Belgium. You have it also in Germany. So this is a trend that we are trying to have special units taking care of those crimes, because we are saying that these are difficult crimes to investigate. You need a special expertise to do it. And if you leave it up to normal procedure in a country, it will be don't prioritized, because then they are losing for all the daily crime. In Norway, we got it, first of all, because Norway, the politicians were accused of Norway being a safe haven for criminals. And what happened was that Denmark started to investigate the case, and immediately the person who was under investigation fled to Norway. So this is the problem. If we do not cooperate, they will just move around. And you're talking about that we are not extraditing to Rwanda. Well, we have not to give up, because Sweden now has accepted to extradite a person to Rwanda that are accused of genocide. The first country who dared to say, yes, we will do it. Of course, the indicted person, he has appealed to the human rights courts in Europe, so we don't know yet. But still, the country is saying we can extradite. But my point is only that to deal with these cases, we have to make sure that there is no safe haven. And also, you need units to deal with them, but also you need a proper legislation, and you need a political will to do it. We have the political will, but that political will doesn't include resources. So we are 5 prosecutors working with those crimes in Norway in a special unit. But also, they were afraid we were not going to have enough to do. We have organized crime when it goes internationally. We have computer crimes. We have sexual abuses of children on the internet. And last year we also got terrorist cases. So with 5 prosecutors, you can imagine that it's quite hard to keep up with everything that is happening. But we are trying, because we, like you, want to fight impunity. We got new regulation that makes it possible now to prosecute perpetrators for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes prior to when the date the regulation came into force. On certain conditions, we can give the regulation retroactive effect. That was because we want to help the ICTR to take over cases when they are closing down. We were asked to take one and we couldn't take it because we didn't have the proper regulation. Also, in that connection, when the regulation was changed and we got this new regulation, we got our universal jurisdiction, enlarged, wider, is that the correct word? Which means that we can investigate and prosecute foreigners for offences committed in another country, even if they are not in Norway. This is a blessing, but it's also a burden. The last thing, and I will close with that, the last thing that happened in my unit was that I had 7 defense lawyers together with the television, Norwegian television, Al Jazeera, coming to my office, presenting quite a big case, and that was a charge, or what you said, it was a complaint against 10 named Israelis. And they are not any Israelis, they are the top political and military persons in Israel for crimes against humanity, and they want us to start investigate them. We are in a position now that we are looking into the question, if we are going to open an investigation or not. Because we fully realize that if we do open an investigation, it will take all the resources we have and more. Also, it will give precedence to other complaints coming in from other countries that are not members of the ICC. So I think this is, it's a tricky situation. We have the jurisdiction to investigate this case. We are asking ourselves if we have the obligation to investigate this case. To that we have arrived at, no, we do not have the obligation, but we have the possibility. It's up to our discretion to decide. What we are also looking into, because we feel that whatever decision we are taking, and we have not taken it, just let me say that, whatever decision we are taking will be criticized. Every word we are writing in the decision will be turned around. So we have to be very, very clever in what we are doing. So what we are doing, we are trying to find out what is happening in the world when it comes to jurisdiction. We have been investigating or get information from Belgium, from Spain, who has this jurisdiction. Belgium has changed it back so it's not as open as it was before. The Prosecutor General in Spain has gone out and said that he wants to limit it a little bit more, because the prosecutor in Spain, who has been indicting or making arrest warrants in similar cases, is saying that we use enormous resources and the result is like zero. And also, we are trying or playing with the principle of complementarity, because that is a principle that belongs to the ICC. But could we use this when it also comes to national authorities? That is what we are trying to look into. So if any one of you have very good advices, I will be very happy to receive that. I'm sorry I spent more time than I should, but thank you so much.
The Jackson Center is a historical and educational facility dedicated to preserving the legacy of this country lawyer who became Solicitor General, Attorney General, a Justice of the Supreme Court, and served as Chief Prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials of Nazi war criminals following World War II. To learn more about this program, Robert Jackson, the Jackson Center, and upcoming events, the Jackson Center is located at 305 East 4th Street, Jamestown, New York, and found on the web at www.roberthjackson.org or contacted by telephoning 716-483-6646.